Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of my video blog series. I'm your host, Nick Renard, and today we're going to be talking about A/B split testing, but we're going to be going a little bit deeper. We get a lot of questions from clients or whoever on how to analyze the A/B split tests that we're running. Because A/B split testing, whenever we pitch that to a client, it's like, oh yeah, we definitely want to be running that. And it's definitely a best practice for us to be running A/B split tests at any given time. The problem is I feel that where most people fall short on A/B split tests is actually analyzing your data correctly. So we run these tests for a certain amount of time, a week, a month, 5 months, whatever, quarter, doesn't matter. And then once we have all this data accumulated, what do we do with it? And are we looking at the right metrics? Are we are we sending people to the right ads in order to get the highest quality scores, best click-through rates, best conversion rates? So I'll be going through a test that I created for actually for people that we interview to become technicians with our company. It's one of the few tests that we're trying out to kind of get people to talk us through it and just see how they respond to a relatively difficult question. So the idea behind this test, this isn't a real A/B split test, is something that I kind of fudge the numbers a little bit, but it's meant to be an extremely difficult A/B split test to determine, and I'm going to kind of give you I'm going to be giving you the answers essentially, but also talking you through why some of these variables are very difficult to analyze. And I will say that if you were running another A/B split test, that most of them are not nearly this complicated. It's definitely the most complicated one I've ever seen. But I'll be talking you through like why and what you should be analyzing here. So here's an example A/B split test. We'll just start at the very top here. Date range is 3/8 to 3/14. So this split test has been running for about a week. Date range is always something you want to take into consideration, especially if you're a seasonal business. If you make all of your sales in Q4 because of the holidays, then if you're analyzing a split test that's between December 1st and December 21st, that's going to be a lot different because you're probably going to be making a lot of sales in that period as opposed to looking at a split test that was running in like June. I think that's fairly straightforward, but even in this situation here where we're looking from 3/8 to 3/14, that's still a pretty small date range. I mean, it's only 1 week. So if you ever, when you are reviewing split tests, there's two variables that you need to take into consideration for statistical significance, and I can't preach enough how important it is to have statistical significance before you make a decision. If you don't have statistical significance, it does not matter what the numbers say. The numbers, the cost per conversion could be 50 cents or the cost per conversion could be $1,000. It wouldn't matter. If there isn't statistically significant data, then you making a decision on that just based on theory, saying like, oh, well, this one looks better. It's like, well, if there isn't statistically significant data proving that it is actually better, then it's just a bad call. So statistical significance, I've said that word like 20 times now, is extremely important. So this 7-day period, if you're looking back over the last 7 days at your A/B split test, maybe you're getting enough traffic where that's enough time to start reviewing the data. I'm not saying it isn't statistically significant, but it is a relatively short period of time that you would want to take into consideration. It's actually extremely important to note here. Any one of these variables, if we're looking at like the date range or any of these columns or the ad copies themselves, none of these are going to be 100% telltale of whether this ad is doing good or bad. Like, it's not like we just look at one column and we're like, yep, average position's better here, so we're going to go with that one. Everything is weighted. So there are going to be variables in here that, depending on how you're talking about it or looking at it, they're going to have more weight than others. So like, if you were to look at this and I told you that this ad generated you 202 clicks, that's good to know because that's a decent number of clicks, and that kind of gives us some insights into how statistically significant this data is. So that does tell us something. But then if we look at the cost per conversion is $51.73, that tells us something else entirely. That tells us more on like the actual performance of the ad. But if we didn't have either of those variables here, if we only knew the cost per conversion was $51.73, I don't have any data telling me that that number is statistically significant. So that number alone is useless. But if I look at this, the 202 clicks, and you tell me that a certain ad got 202 clicks, I'd be like, okay, like great. Did it generate revenue? Did it get clicked on a lot? Like, how are people responding to it? How's the user engagement? There's a lot of unanswered questions if you're only looking at one variable. So it's more about being able to take all of these variables in at once, understand what they mean, digest them, and then come up with, based on those weightings and based on the metrics that are kind of because you can kind of rank the metrics in terms of like highest levels of importance, but like based on those metrics, you need to make a decision. And a lot of the times it is a judgment call, and certain technicians or clients or whatever might make a different decision than someone else, or value something different than something else. But it is important to be able to take in all of these and not just tunnel vision on one variable and be like, yep, that's how we determine our that's our only KPI. If you only have one KPI, you're probably doing something wrong here. So that was a lot of time talking about date range, but I think those concepts are important. The next thing to note here is that, so A/B split test means that we're testing one ad versus another ad. A thing to note here is that this is a test of 4 ads, which is a little bit, it's kind of part of a test if they mention that there are, why are we running 4 ads? That's a great question, because if we're running 4 ads, we're spreading our data more thinly across all of those, so it's going to take longer for us to generate statistical significance. So best practice is usually to run 2, maybe 3 ads. Google did just release a, I don't know, it was not white paper. It was, they released like a statement or whatever saying that the best click-through rates and conversion rates that they've seen have been with campaigns that run 3 ads. I would still advocate 2, 3 is fine, but again, you're just kind of spreading your data a little more thinly. I think both are perfectly fine. The advantage of 3 is that if someone looks up your ad multiple times, then they kind of have like more opportunities to see fresh content. So there's definitely some value in running more than 2. But if you go more than 3, then you're probably kind of flooding yourself, or you're not flooding yourself. You're spreading yourself too thin on your data. So that's something to note about the 4 different ads we're running here. Clicks is interesting here, because if we're looking at just, if this were your A/B split test, if this were your company, and we had these 4 ads running, right off the bat, just looking, I'll take impressions into account here too. If we're looking at this number of clicks and impressions on each of these ads, you can see that the second ad and the 4th ad, so I'll call these A, B, C, and D. Ad B and ad D have like barely any clicks at all. Now, granted, these have only been running a week, so if we let these run for longer, we'll get more data. But 21 clicks or 18 clicks, that's just not statistically significant for me. So I'm not even looking at any of these other variables, just looking at clicks and impressions. I can already tell you that I'm not going to be like if I were presenting this to a client, there's no way in hell I'd be advocating that we run these 2 ads. Now, these ads, hold on, these ads may be good, but I'm not going to tell you that like this is either of these 2 ads are your best ad. And the reason is because we don't have statistically significant data to tell us that. We don't have, even because you can see here, like let's jump over to cost per conversion here. You can see that the cost per conversion on these 2 ads is actually a lot better than these other 2 ads. But since we don't have statistically significant data, my recommendation in this case, just looking at the clicks and the cost per conversions, would be that these ads are showing some promise, so we can let them continue to run and see if this data continues over a longer period of time. And then once these ads have been running for a month or 2 or 3, and maybe we have more like 2 or 3 or 400 clicks, a much larger density, or even 1,000 clicks, then we can make a decision on, on these numbers. Like if this cost per conversion still stays the same at 1,000 clicks, then that's when we can be confident, like, okay, this ad is outperforming the others, or this ad is outperforming the others. So statistical clicks and impressions, they don't tell you anything about like how much revenue the ad's generating for you, but they do tell you a lot about statistical significance, and if you don't have that, you don't have anything. So that is important. Cost, I'm not going to really take cost into consideration here. Cost is also kind of along the lines of clicks. I do think that I should switch the rate of these, but the cost per click is more what I'm going to be focused on. Cost is just kind of telling us like how much money we've thrown at it, but like if we spent $931, yeah, it's kind of like clicks where it's just telling us like how much data we have. Like we've invested $2,600 into this A/B split test where we've only invested 151 into this one. So we're definitely going to have more statistically significant data on this one, assuming the cost per clicks are relatively equal. So let's talk about cost per click. Cost per click is very important, and the reason that cost per click is very important is that cost per click is going to fluctuate. Like if we're assuming that all of these ads are running in the same ad group with the same keywords and all other variables are the same, and one of the ads is giving you a cost per click of $3.99 and the other one's giving you a cost per click of $7.21, keep in mind that your cost per click gets lowered by your proportionate to your quality score. So if these are the same keywords, but the only difference is that one of the ads is getting a better quality score, and so it's lowering the cost per click, then we definitely want to be favoring the one that has a lower cost per click for multiple reasons. First of all, the cost per click's lower. So this one's almost half as much as that one. So if we're spending $2,600, by favoring this ad with half the cost per click, we're going to get almost twice as much clicks with our spend, which says a lot. The other note is that if your cost per click's at 721, that means your quality score is going to be lower. So over a longer period of time, what Google is telling you is that the ad copy that you have here isn't lining up with your keywords or your landing pages. Like the relevance is just bad. That's what it's telling you. So there is something to determine by the cost per click. It tells you a lot about the quality scores. Now, if the cost per click, if there's a very small difference in the cost per click, like let's say one is like $3 and one's like $3.03, it's not really enough for us to be like, oh, well, that one's drastically better. But if you do notice a big difference, like $7.21 versus $3.99, or I don't know, even $3.99 and $4.61, I'd start thinking that was kind of fishy because that's I don't know. That's it. I can't do the percentage math off the top of my head, but you get the idea. So cost per click tells us a bit about quality scores. It tells us a bit about how much bang for our buck we're getting and how relevant the ad copy that we wrote is. All right. So we skipped over click-through rate, and click-through rate, I'm going to tell you right now, is definitely the most important variable on this spreadsheet. That doesn't mean that you only look at click-through rate. You still have to take the other stuff into consideration, but click-through rate is definitely the most highly weighted thing on this spreadsheet. And the reason that's true is because click-through rate is the most dominant variable within Google's algorithm for determining quality scores. So if you favor the ad that has a higher click-through rate, if this ad has a 12.5% click-through rate and this one has a 7.26% click-through rate, this 12.5% over a longer period of time is going to get a much higher quality score. The reason that is because Google is a corporation. They're a business. They're trying to make money. So they reward you for writing ads that get higher click-through rates by giving you lower quality scores. And the reason is because they make more money off of ads that have higher click-through rates. So they call it relevance. The real reason that they do it is for money. But there is something to be said about an ad that has higher click-through rate. You know, if it's attracting people's attention, if it's getting them to click on it, then you know, then there is something to be said about it being better. So click-through rate, very, very important. Again, we can't just look at click-through rate because if we look at this this particular example, you can see that the two ads that we already deemed as being statistically insignificant, which is ads B and ad B and ad D, these two are statistically insignificant, but they also have the highest click-through rates. So that's kind of part of the confusion of this question here. You wouldn't want to, favor one of these ads because we don't have enough data yet, but the click-through rates are looking very favorable. So yeah, that's the reason why we can't just look at click-through rate, because in this case, we just don't have the data to tell us that that's actually true over a long period of time. All right, moving on. Average position. I will say that a lot of people focus on average position too much. We get this saying a lot of, I always want to be in the #1 position. I always want to have 100% impression share. The truth is that the #1 ad position is most of the time not the best position to be in. Ad slots 2 and ad slots 3 are are usually much more effective because they're cheaper, so we can bid less aggressively. There's always going to be somebody that's like overbidding on keywords, so we can let them, there's no real reason to fight them for the number one slot. It's much better to try and pick an ad where, like, instead of paying $7.21 to be in the average position number one, I would much rather pay $3.99 to be in average position number two. There's really not a big difference in terms of which one actually converts better. Sometimes, in a lot of cases, ad position 2 and 3 will actually convert better than the position number 1. It's kind of weird, but it's true. So don't take the, you'll want to take this with a grain of salt. Usually when I look at average position, I'm looking at it more in terms of like cost per click, like determining how is that affecting my ad rank. Because if I saw that the average position on like this ad was like 3.4, but the average position on this one was like 1.2, that's a really big difference there. So that tells us a lot about how Google is ranking us, and what it's going back to the quality scores thing, is telling us about the quality scores. All right, so average position, I would say that on this sheet, it's probably one of the lowest importance on this sheet. But we'll go ahead and start talking about conversion data. So the conversions column is confusing. And the reason is because if you look at this one and you're like, oh, well, these two only had 4 conversions. Those are terrible because this one had 18 and this one had 41. That's 100% not true. And the reason is because we have different quantities of data on all 4 of these ads. So I mean, this one spent $2,600, so it better have, 10 times more conversions than a campaign that only spent $151. So the conversions themselves are going to be more dependent on like how much you've actually spent on these, which is why conversion data itself, yes, it's important, and it's good to take into account. And if you do have 2 ads that have been running about the same amount, then that variable is perfectly fine to determine whether or not an ad is better than another. But a much better variable than looking at the conversions themselves is to look at cost per conversion. I almost always say that a variable is more indicative of performance, so it's less of a vanity metric and more of a performance metric if it has a denominator in it. So if you're dividing it by something, that means that you're comparing it to something, which usually makes a variable better. So that's the case with cost per conversion, where we can look at the cost per conversion, and if I tell you that, well, this ad gets us leads for $26, but this ad gets us leads for $65, like you'd choose the $26 ad every single time, right? So that's why cost per conversion is great, is because we don't really have to look at a lot of this other data. We can just look at this metric, kind of like click-through rate, where we just look at that metric and it's just intuitive. It tells us like which one is doing better in terms of this highly weighted variable. Now, we already said that click-through rate is the most important variable to be looking at. I would say that cost per conversion and or conversion value divided by cost, these two are very similar, but we'll go over this one in a second. I would say that cost per conversion is the second most important variable. So after you determine, you can see how a lot of these are confusing, because if we look at like this ad, let's look at ads A and C here. Ad A has a click-through rate of 7.26%, and then the other one's 5.37, so this would definitely favor ad A. And then you look at cost per conversion, it's still favoring ad A, but then if you look at conversion value divided by cost, which we'll go over here in a second, it's actually favoring ad B. And you can even look at the cost per click. The cost per click's even favoring ad B as well. So that's why this question is actually quite confusing, is because these 2 ads are saying a lot of different things and they're going in different directions. And that's the point of this test, is that it's not supposed to have a right or wrong answer. It's supposed to get you thinking about each one of these variables, and it's supposed to get you talking about how well you weight those. Because if you were just to look at this and be like, well, this one had 41 conversions, so it's the best, you'd just be flat wrong. Because overall, this one is actually one of the worst. It has a really bad cost per conversion. It has a decent conversion value divided by cost. It does have the best cost per click. The click-through rate is actually the worst overall, which is our most important metric. We do have statistically significant data on it, which is really nice, but you can see how by just looking at one variable here, it doesn't tell the whole story. So that's a little bit about cost per conversion. It's pretty simple to analyze. It's just lower is better. But yeah. We'll talk a little bit about conversion value divided by cost now. The way conversion values work in AdWords is, if a lot of companies, especially kind of like larger companies, will have more than one conversion point on their site. So they'll have like contact forms, quote forms, phone calls, maybe like chat pop-ups, newsletter sign-ups, blog sign-ups. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. What we like to do is we like to assign values to each one of those conversions. So a free trial, for example, someone signing up for like a 90-day trial with your product, that's going to be worth a lot more than someone who like opened up the chat box and said like, can I get your phone number or something like that. So we would place a lot more weight on certain conversion points than we would on others, which is nice because we can assign like if we decide that a phone call is worth $100 to us, whereas a trial is worth $300 to us, then that makes it so that if we do have those different conversion values and we're kind of lumping all these conversions together, like if these 41 conversions are a combination of let's use that phone call and free trial example. If all 41 of these are phone calls, then that's $4,100 in revenue. But if all 18 of these conversions are free trials, then that's 18 times 300, calculator, $5,400 in revenue. So you can see the difference there, that even though it has less than half the amount of conversions, the conversion weight is a lot higher in that example. So you can see here where it also gets confusing is like this one has a better, if we're looking at ads A and C here again, the cost per conversion on ad A is a bit better than ad C. It's about $14 better. But then you look at the conversion value divided by cost, and it's drastically favoring ad C. So this ad C is, while it's generating less conversions for total spend overall, the weight of those conversions is actually much higher. So if we're just looking at conversion data, the cost per conversion is actually very misleading, and we would want to be favoring conversion values here because it's generating more qualified leads for us. I think I talked about pretty much everything here. That should give you some good insights into, this is obviously a very complicated example. I would say that in most A/B split tests that I do, that the two variables that I look at are like click-through rate and then cost per conversion. And if those are lining up, then it's a pretty easy decision. But like, let's say that those are pretty close. We definitely want to take conversion value into consideration along with cost per conversion. But past that, I guess the thing that I forgot, I'd first make sure that I have statistical significance. So, that I would have to make sure the number of clicks and impressions and spend is enough to be statistically significant. But after that, I would look at click-through rate, conversion data. After that, I would probably check in on the cost per click and average position to get an idea of like how good of quality scores Google is giving me on these ads. And then after you've reviewed all of those variables, you should be able to tell a pretty good story on which one is the winner and which one is the loser. So yeah, anyways, I hope that kind of gives you some insights into the variables that we look at when we do A/B split testing. And yeah, feel free to leave any questions in the comments, and I will, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video blog.